Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 31 of my Pyanodon's playthrough. In this episode, we start making chromium and rubber. Enjoy. We unlocked another ore processing technology here. Now we can upgrade zinc, which I believe is the last legacy resource that has not received a processing upgrade. And it's relatively straightforward, but the method that it operates on is different. So it uses the bar mill, and now we have to put iron sticks in, and that will give us zinc grade 1, stone, and interestingly, some soil. And then we can send that through an impact crusher to turn it into grade 2 and get some sand. And then we can process that into zinc. And this is interesting because we have a choice about what to do about the soil and the sand. Do we just consider those a byproduct and send them along the factory, or do we process them into something else? And here we go. It would look something like this, where we have slightly less than our 2 input belts. And interestingly, that will require 15 iron sticks, which is 7.5 iron plates. It is very iron heavy to make zinc in this way. That said, we do have the output to basically have an entire second belt of iron plates if we want to. So it's really not an issue. And we probably don't need anywhere near 7.5 zinc plates, but a half a belt of resources is pretty reasonable for the size of our factory, so we might as well aim for that. So doing this creates a few byproducts, and we have the question of what to do with them. Soil can be turned into sand using our efficient recipe here, or we could send the soil into the back of another setup that uses it. We have quite a few. However, most of the time, the setups that are consuming soil are either making sand or muddy sludge. So we can probably process it directly into the sand on location and then just send the byproducts where they need to go. And this setup already makes 1.25 sand, so doing that makes a bunch more. And now we have resources that our factory is already dealing with, so we don't need to worry about that. We can just have a caravan handle it, or we can send it on a belt too. But considering we already have caravans doing this, we should probably have that continue, because ultimately the numbers are just not very big. And we have a question about the sand. Right now the main use of it is concrete and these sand castings, and we could turn the sand into gravel, but this is very destructive to the sand. So it's basically a way of making it disappear and not so much an efficient use of it. So we should probably just have a caravan handle this. And would you look at that, copper is actually slowing down, but that makes sense because it's being converted from one side of the belt to both sides of the belt there. That said, upgrading copper is reasonably far away. It's in logistics science, so if the slowdown is becoming an issue, we may want to just double up the belt. One other thing I didn't point out is that I think we should use advanced foundries for this. Technically, when we have fluid boilers, the advanced foundry is slightly more energy efficient than the gas furnaces are now, although the difference isn't that much, so it's probably not worth changing your factory around. But nonetheless, if we are doing a new build, we might as well use the better buildings. And this setup is going to use a new building to us, the impact crusher. Even though they're facing down, let's make the setup over here. So we're going to have a bunch of ball mills. We might want to copy something that we've previously done. And we're going to need to be a little careful about this. The inputs are significantly higher than the outputs are though. So that should be a repeatable pattern, assuming that it fits here. It very well might not. It looks so nice too. Well, it's been a long time since I've done something like this, but let's do something a little cursed and switch it the other way. I usually like to have perpendicular setups towards the directions of the belts that are inputting and outputting resources, but we can do a straight through design. That'll be super narrow. So it would look something like this. And we would need one more in here. And that should be the 20. Okay, that's the build. But we do also need to get these iron sticks in here, which in itself is not an insubstantial issue, mainly because of inserter limitations. And we've kind of already done something in the past that works for our concrete, and we'll plop this in here kinda wherever makes sense. Okay, let's see how this works. In goes the fuel and the iron. It was balanced before, so hopefully it still is. And then in goes the sticks. Might as well do half and half here. I guess we could have technically put everything on one belt, but I am in the mindset of long-handed inserters, so we're doing this instead. Okay, in comes the ore. Do we have any on our inventory? Of course we do. So there they go, outputting all of their random junk on this belt here. And yeah, it's going to take a little while for that buffer to fill up, but looking good. Now we need the impact crusher, and I kind of just want to go in the opposite direction because we need way less of them, and that'll just make the setup smaller. So here's the impact crusher again. It's a pretty cool building when it gets going, and you can see what the graphics look like. And the throughput of these is pretty small, so I think we can just have both the thing we want and the byproduct on the same belt. And in it goes. Let's take a look at this graphic. It's very neat. It spins very fast, but also has a bunch of dirt and things that kind of pops out the top, so that looks cool. And I'm surprised that they were able to get the graphics to where it doesn't just pause. I think that is similar technology to what they did with the rock paddocks, where when the machine is idle, it doesn't just pause, that it actually does have a different graphic. And yeah, when you have ones that aren't operating, they're just empty. I feel like not every building in Pi does that. It's kind of hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure that's Steam here on these reformers, that it just pauses where it is. So kind of two different ways of doing something, and this is definitely the better way. And I think Zinc is interesting, where it's the first process to where you might seriously consider handling the byproducts and processing them on site. So it's kind of funny that you process the ore and then smelt them into plates, but then you also process the junk. And since this one was 10 long and worked, this should as well, although it is going to get very close to the end, so maybe not. 4, 6, 8, and 10. Now the zinc grade 2, and then the junk will potentially continue or get processed right here. And honestly, processing it does kind of make sense. So let's handle that. It's going to be in a solid separator. This is going to get rid of the dirt, and it's actually kind of a lot. 3 inserters worth. So it goes forward a little bit more, and we'll use yet another belt that we laid earlier. And when it gets to there, the stone will go where it needs to. And one more old belt we can take out. Someday we might actually need all these belts for something, so hopefully not. I was not expecting so much stuff to go through this area, but I have the feeling that laying the belts here for the coal is what caused all the things to go through this area, because I saw all the empty belts and thought, hey, let's use that. And that is how we got to where we're at. But let's hook this up now. We could balance these belts and it might make it work a little better. And we probably should switch the sides. And there we go. It has cleared out. We have most of this taken care of, so we'll be able to copy a caravan. But we do have one extra resource, and it's the one we're making a ton of, sand. And we could put sand here for concrete, but as you can see, it's not really running very much. And who knows if it's ever going to run much in the future? I'm guessing no. So right now, the main use of sand in the factory is actually these sand castings. And we are doing direct insertion, so it's a little tricky. But let's read the contents, not including the crafting recipe. And if sand is equal to 0, the inserters can swing. That way, we can put another outpost right here. I guess just down here. That will always go. Okay, and of course we can put the sand we have in there already. So we'll plop the caravan down, give him his food so he's not wandering, and then copy over something that has a similar path, and that would be this guy right here. So checking on him, he's getting the food, and he's filling up on junk, but we want to change that outpost to this one. It would probably be a little more efficient to do the coarse fraction first, and then the biomass, and then the limestone, and finally all of the sand. Okay, let's see how it works. This seems to be running pretty well. It's building up a big buffer, but there we go. Let's see how he does. So he drops off the coarse fraction, drops off the biomass, and drops off the limestone, but it's actually looking like it's getting pretty full in there, so we might need to have a different dump of limestone. And finally the sand. So what else can we do? We've got a new resource that we can mine, chromium, and it has its own interesting process. Of course, we have to mine the chromium out of the ground, and then it gets sent through a crusher to turn it into grade 1. And what makes this different is that to turn it into sand, we actually need to send it through a solid separator. And I think this is really interesting that they placed it here, because you're probably at the point where you have a ton of extra solid separators left over because you were processing ash and now you're not. So this gives you something to use those separators on, and we are certainly in that situation. where we have a bit of a collection of solid separators. Yeah, a total of 27 of them. Then when you want to make the chromium, it must go through a casting unit, which is interesting. However, this is not a high throughput process like it is with iron and aluminum. It's just, it has to go through a casting unit. And this does actually require limestone. We'll have to see what the numbers is, but this may actually be a better place to dump limestone than our tiles. And it also requires carbon dioxide as an ingredient, which is a little interesting. So we'll do that. And ultimately, the reason why we're doing this is so we can have medium power poles, which is a ton of aluminum, copper cable, and a chromium. Definitely will want these power poles because it's going to make a lot of our builds cleaner. As a side note, for me, these medium power poles are a point of a 3-pointed plan that we have in front of us. Basically, we are still limited on the builds we can do because of our early technologies. So by upgrading these 3 things, we will be able to dramatically change how we do things. So the first thing is the bigger power poles, so we can have more inserters in a smaller area and the builds are just cleaner looking. The second thing, if we look at it further, is rubber, so we can make long-handed inserters, which will make things a lot simpler. And I've been putting them off because there's no point to it right now, but when we have those 2 things, suddenly we can have the automated factory or the electric assembler. So those 3 things mixed together will dramatically improve our factory. The assembler by itself doesn't really help us very much, so that's kind of why we need to do all 3 of these. Where is the chromium? Well, it looks like it's down here. There's certainly more, but this one makes the most sense. And coming in on it, that is another syngas ore. Okay, research is done. Let's make a build. And it depends on how much of this that we want. It's more of a logistical challenge than anything. It is interesting, this is actually a huge amount of sand castings because these other 2 builds make so much with like 0.2, 0.24, and suddenly this is 1.5. So I don't know if I really want to load down our setup here because we only have 1 and putting a second one in there is going to be a little tricky. We'd have to basically put it somewhere else, so I kind of don't want to. And this does make 2 a second, so I don't know. How about let's walk it back a bit? So it's 2 input belts and then a lot of the numbers will make sense here. Like for example, we could do direct insertion of 6 to 12 there, and then it could actually do direct insertion again back into the casting unit. And that seems nice. It is going to be a huge amount of drills. It's just seems like this is a very slow mining resource. And it is. It's mining time 200%. And yeah, this will suck up a ton of limestone. So that might be a better destination than this one. Actually getting full output out of this mine might be kind of tricky. We're gonna have to be very careful to make sure we have the exact number of miners necessary. And at this point, we probably should just max out the patch. Okay. Hook in the fuel, and lots of mining will happen. And it really isn't actually that much fuel, only 100 syngas, and I think we can make somewhere around 600, so this isn't actually that much. Okay, how are we gonna do this? Well, we wanna try to create something that can be tiled. The output of this machine is low enough where we can just use the miner style output of it. It does have 2 more ingredients of limestone and sand castings, which could actually come up through the middle and we can do some underground stuff in here. So something like that. And is that a good spot to put this? Well, it depends on how much it tiles. Yeah. And then flip it around to the other side. Yeah, I like that. I like it. That looks good. Yeah, chromium is an interesting one. Right after you feel like you've gotten used to all of the different ore processing, they give you one that is significantly different. And this one actually is a lot like the antimony oxide in that it's mostly a logistical challenge of just all of this ore that has to move around. So once you've got that figured out, it's a lot easier. And now we're going to need all of that carbon dioxide that we're capable of producing. So I'm guessing 180 is actually a lot, and it totally is. That although our full setup makes 640, this is still a big chunk of that. Okay. In goes the water, making the limestone. But of course we've done that many times before. And here comes one of them. He's a little stuck. He's not even trying now. Come on, buddy. No, it's fine. You could just sit there. Whatever. Whoop. How are you even stuck here? There's nothing to be stuck on. You could just walk through. At least give me some of your food to give to this other guy. This might be a situation where we want to try to put a wall in here so he doesn't get stuck. Let's send him to his previous stop and he'll come back. And let's make some walls. Like if we block that off. He's getting stuck in a lot of places. But yes, if we put a wall here, will that prevent him from going in there? I mean, yes. But now he's stuck in a different spot. I mean, it fixed it. No. There you go. It's good enough for me. I'll take it. And here he comes again. See, he made it in here fine. I don't know. There's something about these buildings. I wonder if it's the inserters. That we can walk through the inserters fine, but I wonder if biter pathing is a little confused by that. Well, let's insert this side and see how it works. Luckily, there's no byproducts from this sorter, so it can go straight through. And in fact, this is probably one of the only setups that could be direct inserted, because just about all of our processing methods create byproducts. So this really only works with chromium. And in goes the other side as well. Okay then, we should be ready to test this out. The only thing we're waiting on is this final input belt of the sand castings and the limestone. And there we go. It's actually pretty noisy in here. Definitely solid separators are a noisy machine. The casting units aren't so bad, but I don't know how to describe this other than noise, because that's what's in here right now. Oop, we didn't connect this one. There we go, chromium. I don't know if that's necessarily something we want in our inventory. Certainly it could be used for handcrafting the medium power poles, but why handcraft them when we can just put them on our bus? Well, cool. It looks like this is going pretty smoothly. But checking on power, yeah, our factory is consistently using quite a bit now. And the electrolyzers are kind of at the top, which makes sense. But seems good. And it's interesting that the advanced foundries, despite the fact we only have a few setups that use them, they are already number 4. So yeah, you got to be careful with them. But yeah, looking good. That turned out pretty well. And this is going to be a great place to get rid of limestone. As long as we're making this, but if it's going into power poles, we are going to be consuming a lot of it. Also, it requires sand castings, which themselves create limestone, so that's pretty good. But it looks like our sand setup here is working pretty well, that this has priority over this side. Okay, we need to inject some chromium in here. Let's just use this over here. So we'll just put a bunch of inserters there for now, to show the value of our better poles. Well, it's already coming in on the side here, so we can just put our 3 inserters in there, and we actually could probably get more, but I don't think we need to worry about min-maxing it that hard. And let's connect up the chromium, and man, we make it fast because he's already back here again. That is the advantage of scale. Once you've scaled up, you don't have to sit around waiting for resources. They just are always there. And there we go. So let's get rid of our old power poles and grab the new ones. So there's nothing special about them compared to vanilla poles. They're just longer. However, that extra 1 space on each side of the pole really matters. Because a lot of the Pi buildings are so large, that having that 1 extra reach will suddenly let you do that. So now we can much more easily fully utilize a caravan outpost. And it doesn't matter so much with these builds that use these slightly smaller sized buildings. However, we did have builds like this, for example, and I guess we could just go up there. And I think I miscalculated and we needed 1 extra inserter in here. And in order to do that, we had to put a power pole up there. So you can see that if the power pole is not there, that inserter in the middle doesn't get a reach. But now they do. So you can see the huge benefit of these. Now the commonly sized Pi buildings can actually be reached by just a single power pole in the corner. But yeah, looking great. The factory is running pretty smoothly, consuming a modest amount of power doing all of these processes that we've set up, but it's mostly functional. The arc furnaces are on the list now, and they're high when they're going, but they go inconsistently. Okay, it's time for some new research. The next thing on the agenda is making rubber, and this is the first new thing in a long time that is made from tar. And the first step is to make carbon black by adding vacuum to anthracene. And carbon black, you can burn it, but it's a pretty terrible resource. Not that there's any pollution, but it isn't really something you'd want to burn. It is interesting that it's called biomass, so I imagine that means it actually wouldn't create any ash. But nonetheless, it's awful. And then we have a recipe for polybutadiene, where we take titanium and aromatics and a bunch of water, and then we'll get 100 polybutadiene on the way out. But most importantly, we're going to get 1,000 steam. And when you see that, you might get real excited and then want to put that into your factory steam pipe. And then you will be very, very sad when you do, because look carefully, it's 150 degrees steam. And most of the things in the factory run on 250. So if you do that, you'll immediately see that your entire factory comes to a screeching halt. So it is absolutely a noob trap. So we're definitely going to want to talk about that. But anyway, if you take those first two things and add latex from our rocks, we will be able to get a rubber. And that rubber can be turned into belts, which then those belts go into other things. However, since it expands and takes up more space when you turn it into belts, you should probably keep it as rubber and send it along the factory in that way. And I like the description of belt. Transfer stuff between points. Yes, but I think in these situations we're kind of using them to transfer rotational energy instead. So the big thing that we're here for is long-handed inserters, that if we take an inserter and add a belt, but most importantly 10 chromium, which is an awful lot, so it's a good thing we made a bunch, we will get 2 long-handed inserters on the way out. So that's important. And then we have these alternate recipes where we can add belts into the recipe for transport belts and get a whole bunch of them on the way out. We'll definitely need to calculate the efficiency increase, but of course, you know it's going to have it. We can make engine units with belts and duralumin as opposed to regular aluminum. And also we have a recipe for rubber stoppers that just involves rubber and doesn't need any coal. I don't think this actually improves the efficiency of the rubber stoppers at all, but it is simpler. So yeah, it looks good. We will hit that. I was looking at the power network, and it's pretty reasonable. Electrolyzers spike and then go down. That's kind of what you would expect. And it's just below the list here. But note how we have this building here, the centrifuge. Before I started recording, I saw it kind of peak on the list there. I'm like, centrifuge. We do have one of those, but we're not using it for anything. And I did not bring it up at the time. Probably got distracted that there was no description. But this is a 258 megawatt building. It is absolutely insane. But it's probably not worth making a big deal about it because we're actually a long ways away from being able to use the thing at all. So we can look at the centrifuge and the different recipes that it makes. And of course, a lot of them are related to nuclear stuff. I'm not even sure what the first thing would be that we would run this on. Maybe this? But it's one of those buildings you get way, way, way before you ever need it. I wouldn't be surprised if we're at least hour 200, if not 300, before we use the centrifuge for the first time. So to get this off our list, because it's 8 megawatts just sitting there, let's put it over here, if it'll fit, where it's not using power. So that just saved us 8 megawatts. Our new logic is working correctly, and it's probably running hard because it's making all these sand castings. But our logic seems to be working pretty well. We have a new process. We're still waiting for it to finish, but in order to make carbon black, we're going to need anthracene oil. And right now, that is just an intermediate. It is produced by tar processing as well as pitch processing. And in both cases, the only thing we can do with it is put it in these distillation columns to make gasoline and coke. And this is definitely a good use of it, but right now, coke is more of a byproduct for our factory. So we don't really want it to be fighting with these machines. And it's kind of interesting to look that the first part of the recipe, processing the pitch, will make 20 coke, and then this other side with the anthracene basically doubles it. So if we're turning all this into rubber, we're going to find that we have a lot less coke output out of our tar processing, which isn't a bad thing. But we do want to have logic on here to make sure that this doesn't needlessly run. So let's put a valve in here and make it an overflow. So anthracene has to be to at least 90% before that'll run. And of course it's going to start running now, but at least we have some logic in place. And here's the build. we need to decide what kind of numbers to run on, and I guess it depends if either aromatics or the anthracene is the limiting factor here, because we would want this to run at the maximum speed of the setup if it could. And our setup here was previously working with 158 anthracene, and it was producing 58 aromatics, and kerosene will produce 75. So actually both sides are pretty well balanced, but it probably will suck up a bunch of aromatics. But nonetheless, let's pick the bigger number, which is 158 anthracene. And that gives us 1.58, but another thing we need to consider is how much latex is going to be available. We calculated that as part of our PyScience, and we're actually only making 0.2 of it. So we certainly could crank this up. We don't want this to be artificially limited, but also it doesn't need to be super big. So this ratio looks pretty good. We'll just have the 1 reformer, the 1 cracker, and the 4 heavy oil refineries. And this is too much, but our factory will be able to produce this during the downtime. And we could calculate another thing here. Let's say we turned this steam into electricity. So we come down here, say steam engine, make sure it's on the bottom, but it's not linking because it is set to 500 degree steam. So we need to come in here and make sure it's 150. And it should be working, but it doesn't seem to be linking. This happens sometimes with Helmod. So let's do another one, or we can just type in the number. We have our 500 degree steam, and that makes about 71 megawatts. I mean, that is actually more than I was expecting, because that actually turns this into a power producer. But of course, a lot of steam went into making these things. But the critical thing to remember is you absolutely cannot mix this steam back into your factory steam pipe, because all of these setups use 250 degree steam. The recipes do say it, but you need to be careful. There are also recipes that don't require 250 steam, and you quickly learn which ones they are because they're the only ones that'll still be running after you make the mistake of hooking that pipe up. One of them is the agar, and it doesn't say 150 degree steam, and that's because it'll essentially take any steam. However, 150 is the lowest temperature steam that you can produce, so that is what this recipe will work with. You can also search for steam and then look at the recipes that we've unlocked to get an idea. So agar will work with it, reprocessing flora will work, the latex will work, the clay will work, but then all of these chemical processing recipes, they all require 250 degree steam. So you could send that low temperature steam around your factory specifically for the processes that use them. You could process these things next to this machine and make use of the free steam. But I think the best way to save it is to pump it into the power plant. But we have to be very careful about where that happens. The steam can go in, but it cannot be allowed to leave because it's going to mix the temperatures. So we'll have to deal with that. But for now, we have a few machines we need, and we're going to be picking a few new ones. The heavy oil refinery, which is this big one, and the multi-purpose cracker, which is this one. In goes the anthracene. This tank is just going to fill up to whatever it fills up. However, we might want to force this process to run specifically for anthracene. We have control conditions for creosote and for tar, and I didn't think there would be enough room to make anything more complicated than this, but since we are sending these belts that way, we do actually have some extra room in here. 2 splitters going into 4. So all of these will be our control signals, and that's a lot of blocked splitters, but that will keep them from being stuck on the end of the splitters with nowhere to go. And then we have all of these, and now we have 4 conditions for each side. So the first one can be the tar, the second one will be the creosote, and that's what's trying to turn it on. So the third condition will be anthracene is low, and the fourth one, well, we don't have any conditions, but we can just have a blank circuit, and that will make it so nothing happens. And of course, we're already low on something else, so it's turning on, but at least now the 3 situations we'd want it to turn on have been covered for, and looking good. So that will confirm that we will have anthracene available. And if it gets above 90%, then it'll just get dumped to turn into coke and gasoline, as we have been doing it up until this point. And should we put this down here and have it be level with the other machines? Probably. Things are going to be a tad cramped in here, but that's alright. So there we go, making the carbon black. We also need the multi-purpose cracker here, but it might look a little better to just go straight into the rubber machines. And we also need the cracker, and well, we're already polluting the area above this creosote processor here, so let's just keep on doing it. It's already blocked, so what's the difference if we block it again with something else? And this is a situation where we might want to have one caravan making both deliveries. And I created a spreadsheet to calculate this if it was complicated, but in this situation it really isn't, because both of these stack in 100 and we need half as many titanium plates as latex. That's basically 20 stacks of latex and 10 stacks of titanium. So the spreadsheet stays hidden for another episode. This one's pretty easy. 2,000 latex and 1,000 titanium. And we don't really need to be storing this steam, but it creates a lot, and I just want to get rid of these tanks. So let's use this, even though it really doesn't look like it's for steam. Okay, we'll do our titanium inserter, and it's a very rapid craft. 1,000 water every 2 seconds, and of course that makes 1,000 steam. And this tank is going to be filled up pretty much instantly. Let's put the latex in there and watch these go. I like how they have a different animation for if it's running or not, and you can even see the little, I guess, rubber bits just kind of flopping down. It's a pretty neat building. And on the other side, of course we got an achievement for it, but now we're making rubber. And let's send it to the end of the machine with an outpost, and we probably want to let this fill up all the way because we want to have as big of a buffer as possible, because when your rubber buffer runs out, you become very sad. Okay, so dealing with this steam properly anyway is kind of annoying. The best way is just to pump it into the power plant in the back. However, that will require that the steam pipes from the oil burners are not the same as the steam pipes for the steam engines. And now we need to leave some room in here. So we'll do an underflow valve, getting it up to 90% if it can. And there we go, it's up to 90% now, which will give a little bit of room for our terrible steam to get in there. And yeah, there's some pretty complex logic in all of these valves to make the power plant work right, but it performs so many functions that it's really useful. So highlighting that with pipe visualizer shows that is the shared steam pipe for the power plant. That is all a very solid 250 degree steam. It comes from everywhere. And then each individual steam engine setup is separated from the main one with pumps and a valve. So now anything we put in here will be isolated and can never go back into the factory. It will, of course, pollute the power plant, but there's nothing you can do about that. And how about let's just hook it up on the opposite side. We certainly don't have to, but it might be a little less complicated to do it this way. And this will more or less permanently make these engines run slightly less efficiently because the temperature of the steam is lower. But if we need more engines, we need more engines. Once we get access to accumulators and a circuit network, we'll be able to have just priority on the steam engines, and they could be right here, and we don't have to be sending the steam all over the place and very, very carefully trying to consume it. 150 degree steam is definitely a noob trap. They are teaching you that there are multiple temperatures of steam and make super sure that you know which one you're using. Okay, it's time to see how this works. We have our 150 degree steam, and then over here we have our 250 degree steam. So when we put this in, it will pollute the steam engines, but they will then start working harder because their steam is not as good. So let's see if this is a disaster. So in it goes. You can see that the temperature of the steam is now decreasing. And as they do, the steam consumption of the steam engines is going to increase. And let's look at the supply pipe for the factory. It is a solid 250. So I think we did this correctly. And wow, it's already down at 212. And we're actually having trouble keeping this tank empty. That shows you how much steam it's using. Kind of curious why. Is the factory energy usage just really low right now? Absolutely. It is extremely low. We calculated it to be about 70 megawatts or so. And if our factory is not really using that much, 160, then it's actually a major part of the factory right now. But it is what it is. And anthracene is absolutely low. So looking at this thing run, it is the anthracene condition that is causing it. So looking pretty good. We've generated a few hundred rubber. So let's put rubber in all of the things that can use it. However, that's going to have to wait till the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.